I am an overachiever, perfectionist, type A personality who does everything right. When I had my little baby girl, I planned on doing that right too, be the perfect mom. For me, that meant making sure my baby had nothing but the best, which of course meant breast milk. Every book I read, and I read them all, proclaims that breastfeeding creates a super baby, glowing with perfection. Breastfed babies are smarter, 9 IQ points smarter. They are healthier, none of this allergic to peanut butter crap. And the best part, their shit don't stink. Seriously, breastfed babies' poop smells like roses, or at least not like shit. When my little baby girl was born, I was determined that Emma would be 100% pure breast milk fed. That was an easy decision to make before I started breastfeeding. From the moment Nurse Ratchet entered my hospital room, grabbed my boob and my baby's head and smashed the two together, I realized that breastfeeding is perhaps not the magical bonding experience between mother and daughter advertised in all the books. In fact, my first impression was that breastfeeding stinks. It hurts. Imagine a little monster latching onto your nipple and sucking hard enough to pull fluid out that wasn't even there yet. And because newborns need to eat every freaking hour, and this is a new and repetitive action, you crack and bleed and scab, but you can't take a break. And even though breastfed babies are better, they don't act like it. They spit up more, like constantly. They need to eat more frequently, and they take longer to sleep through the night. When you are waking up every 2 hours, all night, every night for months, because you're the only one who can feed the baby, formula sounds really good. But as all pediatricians and straight men agree, the breast is best. Despite crying through many a feeding session, I held on, I kept at it, and I was rewarded. Her shit did not stink. And after a couple months of torture, it got easier. I found it sort of adorable the way every time I'd pick up Emma, she'd open her mouth and dive for my chest like a hungry velociraptor. Or how she'd get so excited when I'd start feeding her that she'd kick me and punch me and snap my bra strap. And then she'd pull away from the breast and look up at me and smile like, we're having fun, aren't we all? And then she wouldn't go back to eating until I'd agree with her and say, yes, darling, we are. So, okay, maybe not the beautiful bonding experience described in the books, but it was our bonding experience. I finally felt like I was getting the hang of this breastfeeding thing. And then I went back to work. I am a videographer, so work involves me going out and videotaping stuff. When Emma was nearly 4 months old, I booked a week of all-day shoots. I was worried about how much I was going to miss Emma, but I was also excited about the prospect of grown-up time and, let's face it, a break from all that nursing. It was going to be great to not have to be feeding Emma all day long. Of course, what I failed to take into account was that I was still going to have to be feeding Emma all day long. Now, however, instead of a cute little baby pressed against my breast, I was going to have to pump. If I didn't already feel like a dairy cow, sticking a funnel on my boob and suctioning milk into a bottle would have really helped with that. The worst part was I was on location, and the only private place I could find was my car. So every day for a week, I went out to the garage to pump and hoped that everyone who walked by would just keep walking. There's nothing to see here. I was only able to pump once during the day while Emma ate 3 times. So as the week wore on, the milk supply dwindled. First all the milk in the fridge went, then everything we had stored in the freezer, and it came down to just what I could pump. I stayed up late pumping, I got up extra early pumping, and I managed to get Emma to daycare on Friday with just enough milk to get her through the day, knowing she wouldn't starve. Unfortunately, I ran out of time and energy to make my own lunch, so that day, for the first time that week, I went to the cafeteria for lunch. My turkey panini tasted slimy, but I figured that was cafeteria food for you, and I ate it anyway. I finished out my work day, picked up Emma from daycare, and prepared myself for an easy weekend feeding my baby what I now thought of as the preferred method with my boobies. Saturday morning, I started feeling nauseous. It got worse and worse until I puked up that panini and everything I'd eaten since. You would think after throwing up I would feel better, but I kept getting sicker. I got a fever. It hurt to do nothing, let alone be touched, but the baby needed to be fed. So even though I prickled and burned and felt too weak to hold her, I nursed my little girl into the evening. When my temperature got to 103, we left Emma with Grandma and went to urgent care. They gave me an IV. I said, "I'm breastfeeding, is everything in there okay?" The nurse said, "Oh yeah, it's just saline for dehydration and Zofran for the nausea, you'll be fine." Then they tried to give me morphine, and I said, "Will that affect my breast milk?" The nurse said, "You just won't be able to breastfeed for 6 hours." And to be safe, because my little girl is always hungry, I said no to the morphine. And I made sure to point out I wasn't really in pain, it was more that I was nauseous. Around 11 p.m., a doctor came in and started pushing on my stomach and asking if it was tender. I hadn't eaten since that morning before I threw up. I was still nauseous, and they had pumped me full of 2 bags of fluid, so yes, it was tender. He said he wanted to do a CT scan to make sure it wasn't a problem with my appendix. I said, "I'm not really in pain though, it's more like I just have to throw up." "Well, we have to be safe." "Okay, I am breastfeeding. Is the CT stuff okay for that?" "Yes, you'll be fine." I got the CAT scan, and sure enough, my appendix was A-okay. They sent me home with a prescription for Zofran and some doctor's notes, which included, "Do not breastfeed for 24 hours." I couldn't believe I read that right, but when I pressed the nurse, she said, "Oh yeah, that CT stuff is highly toxic." Every doctor and nurse I had dealt with up to this point had impressed upon me the importance of breastfeeding. I had managed through what I considered Sisyphean efforts to keep my baby's diet 100% pure. And now this urgent care doctor, with his ridiculous theory about my appendix, had essentially ruined my baby's life. Obviously, he had been formula fed. Now, my little girl was going to be polluted by formula as well. Sunday morning, for the first time in Emma's life, we gave her formula. She didn't even flinch. She was like, "Finally, Mommy's letting me have McDonald's." I made it through my 24-hour pump and dump period and went back to breastfeeding, but my milk supply never did recover. I've continued to work full-time, and Emma has continued to get a little bit of formula every day. Other than the fact that I no longer get to win Mommy of the Year, it hasn't been that bad. She didn't grow a tail. So far as I can tell, her IQ is holding steady, and she didn't immediately become allergic to everything. She did start sleeping through the night. And for me, knowing my little baby girl isn't gonna starve because one of my shoots runs late has really taken the pressure off. All in all, formula was not the devil food I feared it would be. The only thing that really stinks now is her shit.